Hello everybody and welcome back to Swamp Dog Games. Well, Humble Bundle is at it again. They've partnered up with Pelgrane Press to come up with the 13th Age RPG Mega Bundle. Today we'll take a look at it, see what's inside, see if it's at any interest to you, and if you do decide that it is of interest to you and you would like to purchase it, you can do so via the link in the description or the pinned comment down below, and you can help support this channel so we can do more reviews and more in-depth look at these RPG mega bundles and see what we get in them. As I said, this is the 13th Age from Pelgrane Press. They've partnered up for their charity, Oceana, which is protecting the world's oceans. You can adjust your donation between the publisher, Humble Bundle, the charity, and if you so choose, help support this channel. These bundles are usually blocked off into tiers. Generally speaking, the $1 tier, the it's not worth your time, and get it up to the maximum tier level. In the $1 tier, it's a 3-item bundle. If this is all you want, is just the quick start rules and a guide to the Dragon Empire, it's a good starting point. That could be worth it for your time. The 9 bundle version, which, get that out of the way, the $10 version, you get a bunch of stuff from their 13th Age monthly magazine, as well as the Kickstart guide. At $10, it honestly is not that much of a value proposition, because there's material in here that you really need the core rulebook for. So unless all you want is just the quick start rules and the Dragon Empire map, then you're really going to want to get into the $18 tier bundle that comes with the full core rulebook, some adventure modules, the Bestiaries, as well as the magazine content listed here. As always, when you go purchase it, the back end, unlike Pathfinder and Paizo, here you get an actual DRM free copy of the PDF that you can direct download to your PC. There's no redeeming a code on a third-party website. So you can also use Humble as your digital library for you digital hoarders out there to just keep everything in here. You can select either the PDF, which is just the single documents, the zip, which includes content. All of these that are marked zip, these are articles from the 13th Age monthly magazine. And then this is the first time I've seen just a download option here, where in this bundle you can also get a discount voucher to redeem on Pelgrane Press's website directly if there's any additional content that you so choose to purchase. Starting off with the maps, because of course I love maps. You do get a world map, or at least the major landmass map of the region that the 13th Age actually takes place in. Now, this is a little bit more important than normal because, as I'll go into in a minute with the system, the political faction system, they call the icon system, does play a much more major role in how the game actually functions mechanically than if you're familiar with D&D style, the Harpers, or the other factions that come up really only in organized play as like a background fluff piece. The faction system takes a much more prominent system in this game, so you do need to know roughly where the spheres of power influence of these factions are. So you do need this map to get an idea roughly if you're going to be using the built-in setting where your players are going to be adventuring, how these areas operate roughly. It does come with the core rulebook. In this, it's a quick 19-page primer. The quick start rules, which is a quick 19th-page primer, as well as the full-on rule set at all 325 pages. Now, I will honestly say I have seen the 13th Age before. I thought this used a completely different system. This Archmage system that it uses is actually based off of D&D's engine. It's a modified version of it. It does use the OGL 1.0A in here to run the 13th Age. It does reference both Pathfinder and Castles and Crusades in here, which does help explain some of the mechanics of how it plays. The brief primer is, if you're familiar with Dungeons and Dragons, OSR, Paizo's Pathfinder, you pretty much have a good idea how the 13th Age plays. At its core, it is based off of these systems. It does take liberties, though, and brings in modern gaming philosophy in here. So, unlike OSR titles like Old School Essentials, Castles and Crusades, that went to try to replicate older versions of D&D, or Pathfinder, which tried to preserve and then improve upon 3rd edition D&D and 3.5 edition D&D, and then take that to 3.5 edition-ish a 5th edition D&D, using a lot of technical terms here. This has gone off in its own direction to take the core mechanics and go off in sort of like an alternate dimension, if you will, version of the game. But there are some things that will be familiar to those who have played various offshoots of D&D, the system. The first is the icon system this uses. So if you're familiar with the factions that come with the core D&D experience that nobody really uses, or a better example would be the factions that come with Pathfinder's system. You do get some minor storytelling things that occur being part of certain factions. In the 13th Age, the faction system takes actually a much more prominent mechanical position here. So as your players are playing around in the 13th Age world, they have relationships with the major power brokers. So you have, for instance, on the core map, the Empire or the Crusaders. These are certain individuals per se, but they lead massive organizations, and your relationship with these organizations will have direct impact on your roles. As I'm reading through here, essentially, imagine you're in a social environment. You would roll up your faction relations, would be pluses and minuses to your interaction with the environment or with the game master, and would have direct mechanical bonuses, both in terms of how they impact the story of what's going on, as well as direct mechanical benefits to your role of how your characters are interacting with the NPCs. It does also have a modified skill system, unlike the system that Castles and Crusades uses, which is you just have a static number based upon primary, secondary attributes and roll against it. This takes in a system that kind of reminds me of the Q system, if you're familiar with Catalyst Game Labs RPGs, such as MechWarrior Destiny, the Q system, but adds a mechanical component on top of that. So imagine, instead of in classic D&D where you'd roll your acrobatics check if you're trying to climb a ledge, here you would put in sort of like a Q system. Oh, your background of your character is they were once part of the circus. So if you're doing climbing a ledge, that could be a benefit that your circus background applies to, but then also simultaneously applies to maybe you're interacting with other performers, and that narrative social connection, it directly has play in there. So not only you don't really have traditional skills per se, but your background has direct impact to mechanical benefits, as well as sort of the storytelling of what's going on here. This tries to be a very epic story focused game. They've also made some overhauls to the combat system. The math is closer to Paizo's. It's not as restricted as the math range that you're going to be operating in, like D&D 5th edition. Here you're going to get some AC over 35 monsters that you can fight if you've leveled up for it. here's the icon system, for instance, of the effectively the different factions that you'll be interacting with and where their alignments are. The combat system is your basic roll a d20, add your modifiers, take away the penalties, and against systems that you're familiar with. It does have the addition of what they call the escalation system. So every turn in combat, there's a d6 that at the first turn starts at 1, second turn starts at goes to 2, third turn 3, etc., etc. And this is directly how much additional bonus that the players get in a combat situation. So as combat goes on to round 6 or longer, they get more bonuses to actually hitting the enemy or targeting the enemy or damage done in here. It reminds me, if you're familiar with the video game Octopath Traveler, the idea being in classic Dungeons and Dragons, you kind of are incentivized to end the fight as quickly as possible because, and thus spend all of your magic or resources up front to try to end the fight because you don't want it to progress longer. With this escalating die system, it provides actually incentives to hold off on some of your more powerful attacks until later, to thus have a higher chance of guaranteeing the actual targeting and destruction of your enemies in the system when you use it. Using Octopath Traveler, if you're familiar with the BP points, how you'd use your lesser abilities to like defeat the shield and then save up your powerful attacks when you could boost it, and like by turn 4 where you could 4x the power of the attack, the escalating dice system kind of creates a narrative push towards making fights become more deadly later in the combat than earlier. As I said already, in comparison this with other games, this version of D&D is really pushing in sort of the power fantasy through my read of here. When you look at classic D&D, and then if you thought that was power fantasy, this takes it to a whole new level. If you are an OSR player where you like that deep gritty, your players are not the hero, are not gods, they're not the chosen one, they can die at any time, they're just guys and gals put in odd situations that they got to survive, and the core wits of the player is what determines whether or not the characters survive the encounter or not. This really goes into the power fantasy and the epic narrative focus. This is, you want a sword and sorcery or fantasy movie that you're playing, and you want those epic fights to happen at the end as combat gets more intense, more deadly, and more epic as things go on longer. This tries to mechanically push that game style into that type of crescendo play where the best skills are used later, not earlier. As I said, if you are familiar with D&D, though, there's lots in here that you can easily see how it works and can convert it over without too much trouble. It's not as directly compatible with D20 games or OSR because how some of the math here, as you can see here, where we've got hit point totals and how it goes off in odd directions with some of the material that it uses, and it could be useful with OGL and D&D and OSR style games, but this is going to take a lot more work on the game master to make them compatible because of just some of the eccentricities of the escalating die system and how it really lays into that power fantasy that you're going to have to be careful because you pull an OSR adventure, your players are going to be way overpowered with this system if you use it as your primary engine, or if you use a 13th Age RPG and you're trying to play it with an OSR rule set. I think you're going to be in for a miserable experience. So just bear in mind, it's the same core DNA, but it's just enough of a difference that it could be a little bit taxing on the game master to try to smooth over these edges. But it is something that's not going to take forever to train your players on, and could be a nice alternative if you are just want that break from the nitty gritty OSR, always at risk of dying, and want to indulge in some power fantasy roleplay. Now, what was really intriguing when I got this bundle is the 13th Age soundtrack that is actually included in this. Unfortunately, the one thing you can't do on YouTube, even though it would be fair use to do some preview of the music, so for review purposes, so you know what you're getting, YouTube is still very harsh when it comes to trying to strike channels for copyright music, so I'm not even going to risk it here. But this PDF does give a little bit of an explanation of the tracks you get. I have to say, I think all RPGs should actually commission their own soundtrack. I have listened to it. There are parts of it that it's, or I should say, it's not bad. It is a little bit generic-y fantasy. There's nothing that is going to strike out as, oh, this is obviously a 13th Age soundtrack. It's very B plus, B tier movie grade soundtracks, which is not saying they're bad, but you can definitely tell it's more generic. The tones, it's not going to be something that's as distinctive as such as a Hans Zimmer soundtrack for like Dune as an equivalent. It is, though, fitting for the setting. You could probably find a lot of these songs worth actually listening into the current work. Again, the 13th Age theme song is worth giving a listen to. After hearing it, I'm like, all RPGs should have their own theme songs commissioned. They're definitely laying into the rules, which is sort of that epic power fantasy variation of the D20 system, and the music fits that. Their escalation music, for instance, they give an example here, is that these come on loops that you can add as to sort of like help mimic the crescendo attempt with the escalation die system as the turns go on in combat. Is getting deadlier and faster and more epic, have the music that goes playing with it. So it is a interesting add-on. Decent tracks, definitely worth a listen to if you do buy the full tier. I'm actually going to jump a little bit to the end for the magazines. These are separated out in the zip files as multiple articles from 13th Age Monthly. They're short little pieces. I'm not going to go over every single one because they're all just little bits and pieces of add-ons. I'll go through a couple from each of the magazines. This one here, as you can see, the Temple of the Sun Cabal. So insert your Praise the Sun memes here, please, where you can get some add-ons about how the Icon faction system works. Some more add-ons for your game in this one. Fire Elemental, for instance, spell or monster that you can get. A little like one-shot adventure type thing that is also included in this one. And the maps that go with the temple to boot. The 7 icon campaign. The core conceit is that the political system of this game includes all 13 icons. This has a shortened version with it if the 13 faction system is getting a little bit too complicated for your game. The Temples of the Frog Folk. This is an additional player race that you can introduce into the game. As going through here, my first thought, as soon as I got to this page, this image, was, does anyone remember the Bucky O'Hare cartoon? Bucky! Captain Bucky O'Hare! Because I saw this and my first thought was an Imperial Toad stormtrooper trying to fry some mammals before running, looking all tough and buff, like I'm top of the food chain here, just before a Beetlejuicean berserker baboon shows up and kicks their ass. And so, on the go!
Imagine a couple of dumb furballs taking us on!
Wait till they open the airlock and see us waiting for them.
It'll be like catching flies in a bottle. Surrender in the name of the Toad Empire!
Are you talking to me?
A Beetlejuicean berserker baboon!
Run away! Help!
Yo, baboon! Yeah, get out of my way!
Baboon! Baboon!
Yeah!
Cayuga! Cayuga! Cayuga!
I don't know why this stood out to me like that, but it came to my mind. And it's just an additional player race and the background for bringing them into the game, and some additional monsters that come with it. Again, this also brings in like golems that can be brought into your campaign. I don't know why I have the map up again. Then you also have the GM screen that comes with it. The art that comes on the outside I'm not going to show because it's just art. You have all the mechanical information here. You have a broader GM's handbook here with some additional information for the game master about the monsters and some basic adventure idea and some things that could be useful for new game master in this series to sort of like get their feet firmly established with how the system plays, some of the more advanced features of combat in the system. Nothing that is required per se for a really experienced game master, but if you do need that additional help switching over from classic D&D into the 13th Age style of math and game mechanics, this could be a good primer for the game master. Again, additional content material in here, how to have a little bit of a fun time with the players with some additional magical items, different coin tricks and gimmicks in the magazine. All of this is just sort of like Unearthed Arcana from the D&D series. These are just short modules with unique individual adventures that all just vary wildly in terms of what they add to your games. You do also have 2 loot/treasure books that include an expanded list of material to reward your players with their actions in the game. Again, because the faction system, or they call it the icon system, does have much more mechanical influence what faction relationships you garner throughout the system. They do have an impact on unique treasures and some of the, I believe I saw in here a couple of the loot tables that they run some influence on with the type of treasure and rewards you can get. This is the one, Loot Harder, and then you also have the Book of Loot. Not the musical instrument, though I wish they had, with like a bard adventure on here, because that would be hilarious, that type of play on words. But no, just your now, the second first adventure module, though I say that kind of loosely, just because I'm a little bit unfamiliar with the 13th Age system, their design philosophy with this. As it says in their description, this is and it reads like a adventure module, but it says that you can also then cut these out and turn them into one-shot or mini-arc adventures. There is a lot of source material in here in this setting that allows for new monsters. In fact, it says that there's over 100 new monsters in this. There's new icon-specific monster abilities to customize agents of the Prince of Shadow. Again, the icon system being sort of the faction system in here. Multiple magical items, new PC races, including Lava Dwarf, Ooze Folk, and those are some interesting ones to say the least. But it looks to me like a traditional adventure module, but it says that you can one-shot these as part of a and just more modular than how I'm reading it, at least as far as the product description goes in here. But you also have an entire township that you have here. It could be a good setting, again, because of the issues of as long as you don't have to take over the mechanics. There's material in here that you could use in your own OSR or D&D game, as far as like the setting goes of the township and the NPC description, and some of the other world building aspects of here are completely usable outside of this. Just be wary that you having to rebalance for a game other than the 13th Age for your players to be at the appropriate power level for the type of adventuring they're going to be going on in here. But there is a lot of material, again, at 234 pages, that both add-on material as well as story material that you get in the Shards of the Broken Sky booklet. The Shadows of Eldaron book, this is more of a starting adventure for new players into the 13th Age setting. You have a decently filled out starter town with enough material. It's not fully fleshed out the same way that if you were to buy the Tollus book from Monty Cook is for a city, but there's enough material in here to facilitate. There's some intrigue that's going on between this town's wizard academies, and your players get caught up in the middle of it, starting adventure. This is probably where I'm assuming a lot of people are actually going to start in the 13th Age setting, would be through this booklet here. Okay, quick word as I just covered the next two Bestiary books in this bundle. Be careful again with Humble Bundle. They have a real problem with their bulk downloader. As I'm going through here, I realized, wait a minute, I'm missing the Bestiary books. Come to find out, I had 6 books not download that I didn't read the first time, and now I've got to read as part of this review. So again, be careful with Humble Bundle. They still need to get that bulk downloader fixed. The next 2 books that you get well, technically 3 are the Bestiaries. These are going to be your generic fantasy monsters that you need for adventure setup. Again, you get Bestiary 1. Most of this is monsters that you've probably seen before, just statted for 13th Age's particular eccentricities, though there are some offbeat ones that you're probably less familiar with in here. But this is your Bestiary 1, this is your Bestiary 2 module, and but there is some really nice artwork in here that goes with these creatures. You are not going to be at a loss trying to imagine what these creatures are with this artwork. It will very vividly and properly put it in your mind what on earth you're dealing with this artwork that's provided in here. And though technically not a bestiary because its primary focus is on demons, however, it does have the demon stats in here. This is all about demon life, demonologist, how to fight demons. There's some material for the players, but also a lot of demons to actually encounter and what they do, and
The
what you're
Crown
gonna need,
Command
to defeat
module
them,
is more
courtesy
aimed
of
at game
the
masters.
Book
This
of
includes additional
Demons.
monsters and content
for players to face in the adventure system, but it also focuses a lot on sort of theme of encounter design, particularly combat encounter design, a little bit more expansion on the icon faction system and how to get more epic encounters. There's some material in here that could be used as like one-shot starters or a little bit of filler needed if the game master has sort of a hole in their adventure. Um, that just again with that focus on trying to make encounters as epic as possible for that power fantasy play, and how to do so mechanically and keep things spiced up and constantly engaging the players through this module. Next up is the Elven Towers module. This is an adventure setting where the elves did some dumb things, and now they're paying for it and have to bring in you, the epic heroes, to fix their own dumb mistakes. This one, to me, comes across as kind of comedic and adventure setting because it's like so obviously this was a bad idea. Why the hell did you do it? And you're now paying for your dumb mistake type thing. That the players have to retrieve some keys to unlock the true origin of the the elven power, because these idiots locked it away and now need access to it again, and they can't do it, so the heroic heroes must be brought in to do it on their behalf instead. There's a lot of unique monsters in here. From what it says, it directly tells you that they don't translate well outside of this adventure because of the narrative play. I know that seems to be the common thing of reading through here, that the 13th Age is very narrative focused, but this is the first time I've caught it where it actually just calls out, no, the narrative monsters in this scenario are tied too deeply to here that they're not realistically going to be able to transfer those motivations outside the scenario, which is something I'm not used to dealing with as one who plays predominantly OSR games where everything is pretty modular and cookie cutter and can put wherever. This is the first time I've seen something tied so deeply that it outright says you might not be able to convert this outside of the scenario because of how the narrative module works. So that was interesting to come across that in the Elven Adventure module. The Book of Ages, I must be spoiled by being used to dealing with Paizo and WotC and just the design philosophy they have with OSR, have had on OSR games. I'm used to either adventure modules coming out or single focused add-on material. This one seems to be just an outright smorgasbord of options of stuff that I can't have a hard time like seeing the overarching theme. It's got player options that you can add, equipment, it's got new spells, it's got new monsters, just as I said, a smorgasbord of all kinds of options to just add to your game across a wide spectrum of just out there-ness that is available. So more content, more good, and you're going to get plenty of more content in the Book of Ages across a wide spectrum of topics and material. I didn't see this one the first time through. Does anyone remember the CGI in the film, I believe, Young Frankenstein? I am dating myself today with first Bucky O'Hare and now this. My first thought is the CGI stained glass knight from the young Sherlock Holmes film with this piece of art right here. And the next one up is the Crown of Axis module. This is another starting adventure because of just, again, the focus of the 13th Age on that sort of narrative, epic battle situation thing. This is an adventure for first level player characters that just throws you right into a gladiatorial arena. it says that it can be used as the start of a campaign or just as a beginning level one-shot adventure. I can't think of any one-shot adventure for first-level players I've ever seen that's like, no, just throw their asses right into the Coliseum. They'll be fine. But because of the combat system being focused on, again, that narrative escalating combat die system, I guess it works well in here. I'll have to play it to actually see it for myself how well this balances out. But it is going to be an interesting first encounter for just throw all the player characters in a pit and shout, "Are you not entertained?" At them as the battle commences. Insert the Star Trek dun, 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 dun. Music here. And now getting into just bonkers bizarro world, just because I'm not used to the 13th Age game design philosophy. Here we have living mega dungeons that decide to come up from the underworld for players to explore in. Just the artwork of this scene, my mind goes to the main area in the Elden Ring game, and thinking of those walking mausoleums, but taking this to like the extreme that it's an entire mega dungeon that just erupts from the underworld for the players to explore. And I know this is focused on epic power fantasy. I'm just not used to it as a OSR player, where you're just on the back foot, just average Joes and an above thrown into the thick of it, and you're just trying to survive it type thing that I'm used to in those OSR adventures. This just goes balls to the walls, just, nope, the dungeon's alive, the dungeon came from hell, you now explore it and defeat the monster at the end of it. So, very interesting. And then how it ties into, again, their faction/icon system as this, you just explore this living mega dungeon that is all levels of bizarre. As I said, I'm just not used to this type of gameplay. It sounds epic. I'm expecting these to be like the plot lines of Sword and Fantasy TV series, quite honestly. Just how bizarre these just go off the rails with the grand scope of the epicness of the encounters that you're dealing with in here. This is also the only one that actually comes with a 5e conversion guide that translates what's going on to your 5e players. I'm not sure why this is the only one that comes with it. Even looking at the website, this seemed to be one of the few things that actually had a 5e conversion guide. It doesn't look that complicated for those of us who are just not used to the 13th Age wackiness and might be a little bit more comfortable playing it with the D&D system. I'm surprised you don't have more of those here. Did that actually say use ChatGPT for crypto trading? Oh, we've entered into the worst timeline available. On to the next book. Well, we did the Mega Dungeon, now we do the prequel to the Mega Dungeon, which is also the 2014 Free RPG Day booklet for the 13th Age. In this adventure, you've got a quiet little township that's been beset by trolls, and it just starts off and gets you into then having to eventually deal with the actual mega dungeon itself in the Stone Thief book. Well, since we've already talked about the mega dungeon that just lives and springs up from the underworld to plague the surface, well, we might as well adventure into the actual underworld and what that entails. So it's not quite as a second realm as Mystara, the Hollow Earth or Hollow World series does. This is closer to the one that just keeps entering my mind is C.S. Lewis's The Silver Chair, that sort of underground kingdom. I know there's better examples of underground kingdoms. Uh, so you're not in the actual dead underworld, but you are in the literal under the world environment where the dwarves and all kinds of freaky monster things dwell. Man, it is 2 o'clock in the morning, and seeing this bad boy, I know I'm gonna have a miserable, nightmare-fueled night just off of this one picture alone. God damn it! But yeah, this one makes me think of that beginning dungeon in Fallout 2 for some reason. My mind's going all over the place, hardly focusing on the review anymore. But this is going to be your equivalent, I guess, of the Underdark setting in here. And man, I'm going to have a rough night looking at some of these photos in this adventure module. So we've got our dungeons that come up from the underworld, and then when we want to go back into it, that's an option too, according to this book. Last but not least, we have some map folios for adventuring if you need to get handouts or to get tied in with the equivalent adventure modules that these are attached to. And decent handouts, I guess. Oh, even a circus, just like in Pathfinder. Overall, just because my unfamiliarity with the system and my preconceptions that were completely out of whack with reality, it looks like an interesting system. I'm not used to the power fantasy / the dramatic adventure style, just because, again, coming from an OSR game, I think you could make the argument that the 13th Age is kind of OSR adjacent, just because it takes D&D into a unique realm that the rules don't currently allow for, with its own particular peculiarities with the escalation system and their icon system. I hope to actually get my hands on a core rulebook soon to actually do a proper review of the core rules for this channel after reading through this material and just how bonkers it could get. I know I didn't go fully into depth all the magazine material just because I get into a rant enough with these reviews, and just to keep it from becoming a 2-hour long thing going over all of the magazine material, I kind of blew through that. But everything else is a very good representation of what you actually get in this bundle, and could be well worth it. Again, it's familiar enough that a D&D / D20 / OSR player can learn this very easily, but it is a distinct enough system that it has turned into its own design philosophy that goes with it, that runs completely counter to a lot of the direction that the OSR is going. Again, power fantasy versus deadly serious gaming. For the right group, I can see this being really fun, really nice, epic style combat and narrative adventures. This particularly likes to really push the narrative focus rather than the combat, even the escalation dice system, just because of making combat faster and more deadly as more terms go by, thus ending it sooner so you can go back to the actual narrative of the adventure, and that's what most of their modules focus on. I don't have my D20 with me, but for me personally, my initial reaction is that this is probably a good 15 bundle if you like the D20 system and want to indulge in power fantasy. As an OSR player, this has been completely out of what I'm used to, with just how crazy the idea of a whole living dungeon that just pops up from the underworld that the players move around in and then hack and slash some extreme monsters and then disappear again. But for the right group, this will be real fun. I'm not sure about my group right now if they would be willing to indulge in this sort of power fantasy, but we'll see if I can convince them after I do a full-on review. What are your thoughts on the 13th Age and this Humble Bundle? Let us know in the comments down below. As I said, if you want to help support the channel, if you are interested in purchasing this, you want to purchase it through our link below, you can help support the channel and we can do more reviews of Humble Bundles as they become available in the future. Hope you all had a good day. Hope you all have a good weekend. See you next time. And I get one more ad, no less, before this whole review is over. See you next time.